excited to have you in the courses. Can you share a little bit about why you joined and what you're hoping to get out of them?
Yeah, right now I'm a upcoming senior, and then my plan is to apply this coming fall. And I've been self-studying LSAT and like really on and off. I started learning like the basics back in December last year, I believe. And then when spring semester rolled around, I didn't really do that much. It was only like 2 weeks before the June test. I like did like a practice test every single day, and I took the June test. And then like the score was fine, but I definitely want to like have a major improvement for the September test since like I'm applying this fall. And then right now, when I was doing practice tests for the past like week, 2 weeks, I found myself in a plateau. And then I think I was in one of your live LSAT courses, and I asked you the question how I can get out of that like plateau. And then you said maybe it's time to change up the like my method of studying. So I thought like maybe it will be a good idea to enroll in a course and have like a human on the other side helping me with my questions instead of just like an explanation sheet. So
Sure. Well, I'm glad you're in the courses. I'm looking forward to helping you as you move forward. So
thank you.
Of course. So what are you looking to do to change your approach over this next month?
What I'm looking to do, or what like the specific problems that I want to improve on.
Well, what are you looking to change about your prep?
So right now, my major problems are reading comprehension and logical reasoning, which is like a huge part. For reading, and okay, one of the recurring problems I have is that I find myself not being consistent. Like sometimes for reading comp, I'll do really great on certain passages, but then on others, um, I wouldn't even understand like what the main idea is, like what the approach of their argument is, and then sometimes that sets me back a lot. And then for logical reasoning, again, it's like not consistent. Like sometimes I get 2 wrongs in a section, sometimes I'll get like 7 wrongs, and then I tried summing up like the kind of questions that I got wrong, but I couldn't figure out like a theme of why I was getting certain questions wrong, other than the fact that I just didn't even understand like the stem when I was reading it. But maybe after I go back reading it, I'll understand. But like there are some questions where I still don't understand why like I got it wrong. So
what does your review process look like?
So after every prep test, I'll review right away. I'll like put down, I think it's called blind review, but I basically just like note the numbers down without looking at the correct answer. And then I'll like go back and then like redo the question again and then see if I can get it right. Sometimes I do, but more and more now, which is weird that I don't get it right on the second try. And then I try looking at, I have like a lot of test explanation like materials. So I try looking at some of the materials, but a thing that I find slightly frustrating is that sometimes like although they have explanations for each of the wrong answers, I feel like their explanation isn't really tailoring to why I got it wrong. It didn't really answer my question of like why I think that was right. So that's like slightly frustrating. And then I think that may be hampering my reviewing process. Like I may not be getting the most out of it.
Agreed. I think that the explanations are only one person's thought process around that question, which is one reason why having multiple sources of explanations is useful, because maybe you will find one that is more in line with your thinking. But ultimately, other people aren't ever going to think about it exactly the way that you think about it. And so I would encourage you to stay away from those explanations. Don't use them as a crutch, especially if they're not lining up with your thoughts anyway. What could you do to articulate your own thought process? Are you keeping a notebook where you're writing out by hand what your thoughts were?
I have like an Excel sheet of like the questions I did wrong, and then I would say let me take a look. I would say for around half of the questions, I kind of note down like why I got it wrong. Like those are the questions I kind of understood after the review process why I got it wrong. And then like after a while, like maybe a weekish, I'll go back just like to skim the questions I got wrong, and then like the reasons why I got them wrong. Also, another thing that I noticed with myself is that I need to get into like a momentum of doing LSAT. I know like in what one of the many materials that you distributed is that to avoid burnout, to not to do LSAT every single day. But I find myself I have to do it every single day to make myself in the zone. And then like once I take a break, like I took a break on Monday, I didn't do like any LSAT for a day, and then the next day when I did it, I felt significantly like out of it. I just don't feel as comfortable when I'm not doing it every single day. So, and I think that's like one of the reasons why I don't do well on the test is that I just don't feel like I'm in the zone. It's hard to explain, but sometimes like when I'm reading the logical reasoning question, I can just see through like the argument and then I can like predict the right answer. But then sometimes it just takes me a long time to even read through the stem of the first question. So
Yeah, well, first off, do what works for you. If being in the zone for you means doing at least a little bit every single day, then do that. At the same time, you don't want to run the risk of burnout by doing too much. So
right.
timed exam a day is definitely not the way to go. But if you want to do at least one game or one passage or a couple of logical reasoning questions at minimum each day, that would be fine. Just make sure it doesn't creep up too much.
Okay, gotcha.
And I totally get and agree with you about what it means to be in the zone. It's hard to articulate, but you know when you're in it, you know when you're not, and your performance varies accordingly. And so think about, what would it take for you to be operating at 110%? Would it mean good sleep, good exercise, eating well, relaxation, whatever it is, whatever that perfect day looks like for you, that perfect week? Make sure that you're crafting that for yourself, especially in this final month.
Gotcha.
What is your schedule like in terms of doing full-length exams?
So right now school hasn't started yet. So usually I'm trying to like get up early enough so that I do it starting 8 or 8:30, but I'm like been lacking a little behind. So I usually start around 9. And then one of the things I want to train myself is stamina. And that because that's one of the problems I noticed from my actual test last time. So I do 6 timed sections every day that I practice, and I take a break when I finish 4 sections, so that it's kind of emulating actual tests, but then I do 1 section more. So that's like my schedule, and then after that I'll review.
Cool, that's good. I mean, I don't think you need to do that for every single timed exam. That might be a little bit overkill.
Okay.
I think maybe mixing in once every 5 exams or so to do 6 rather than 5 build endurance is probably enough.
Okay, gotcha.
But you know what works best for you, but see how that might change things if you were to do 3 break 2 instead of 4 break 2. You could also do 3 break 3, because you're never doing 4 back-to-back on test day, but you are doing 3 back-to-back.
That's true. Okay, I'll try that out.
So consider that. And then back to the review, the issue of review again. You talked about writing out why you got something wrong. I would encourage you to go a little bit deeper and more nuanced into that review process, looking at where your misunderstanding was. Was it in the stimulus? Was it with confusing wording in the question stem? Or was it tempting wrong answer choices or discouraging right answers? Because there are a variety of reasons you might get it wrong. And maybe there are 2 or 3 reasons you got a single question wrong. If there were multiple things you misunderstood. So to really take the time to write that down.
Okay, that's great advice. I'll try implementing that in the future.
Sure. And this takes time. This takes at least minimum 10 minutes per question if you're doing it properly and in sufficient depth. Don't do it in your head, and don't make it just a single sentence.
Okay, gotcha.
Now, I know we only have a few minutes left. What would be the most important thing for us to cover right now?
I would like to kind of circle back to what you mentioned of like reviewing wrong answers. I wonder if you have like a whole arsenal of things ready, like the things I should check for when I'm reviewing wrong answers, because some of the things you mentioned were if I got something wrong in the stimulus, if I didn't predict the conclusion right, and then if the wrong answers I misunderstood, or like the right answers I excluded for certain reasons. Do you have like a list of things that I could look for when I'm reviewing wrong answers, because I feel like that would be really helpful for me to at least like get me started. Because sometimes I think maybe like I didn't get the stimulus right, but I don't realize that.
Yeah, sure. That's a great question. And there are thousands of things they could do to make a question more difficult. And they're
Mm-hmm.
only pulling a handful of those for an individual question. So I don't have an exhaustive list,
Okay.
but there are a couple of things I'll point you in the direction of looking at.
Okay.
If we're talking about formal logic, like conditional statements, they might put they might give you the necessary condition before the sufficient condition, requiring you to rearrange things, like y comma if x. People might not spot if the word if in the middle. That's one way they increase difficulty, by not giving you things in an order that works for you. They might bury the conclusion in the middle of the stimulus rather than putting it nicely at the beginning or at the end. They might use confusing words like unless, except, until, and without that require extra translation. They might make it so that in order to link multiple conditionals, you have to take the contrapositive of at least one and rearrange them. In answer choices, they might bury one little word at the end of the sentence that completely changes the meaning. And if you're reading too quickly, you might miss that. They might change the degree of certainty from stimulus to answer choice, but leave everything else the same. And so the phrases seem to match up. But again, that one little word related to degree of certainty or quantity changes the meaning entirely. And then for question stems, they may use unfamiliar wording that is less conventional than what you're typically used to seeing. So that requires extra translation for you to relate it back to what you've done before, to say, oh, that's just a flaw question, or that's just a principal application question. These are the kinds of ways you want to be thinking about the questions more from the test maker's perspective. How are they laying traps? How are they increasing the difficulty? For a level 5 question, the most difficult, there could be 5 different things they did from what I just rattled off to you that they could include. And so if you avoid all but one, but you still fall for that one, you might still get it wrong, or it might take you longer than it otherwise would have.
Gotcha. And kind of a follow-up to that, I noticed that a lot of things you just mentioned include that, oh, they buried a word and I didn't notice it, or they changed up the sequence, and then like the common problem is I didn't notice it. So how do you improve on that? Do you just do enough of the questions and so that you kind of see through some of the techniques that the test makers lay out for you? Is that like the way to like the improvement, or?
Yeah, that's exactly it. This is a test of pattern recognition more than anything else. And so with practice, you will start to see the patterns more. And so it's about exposing yourself to a wide variety of questions to see the various tricks they use, and then also reviewing them in depth. So you're actually noticing the tricks, noticing specifically what is tripping you up personally.
Okay. And also another quick question that I have, kind of follow up to that. You mentioned that, oh, if like a answer choice has a really extreme word to it, sometimes maybe it may be wrong. But that's like a strategy that I've heard, but things like that are pretty relative. You can't, like a lot of times when they have an extreme word or superlative, it probably is wrong, but then if you apply that across board, it sometimes can trip you up on certain questions. And then I think another question that I sent you, which relates to this, is that in the parallel questions specifically, sometimes they require like a very, very exacting, like a mirroring of the stem, whereas sometimes it's kind of loose. So sometimes when I'm doing a question, I miss when I'm reviewing, I was like, okay, the wrong answer just didn't mirror the stem as exactly as as it should. When I turn to another question, the correct answer isn't really mirroring the stem that in the same way. So like that confuses me a little bit.
Yeah, they're very tricky. And one note on extreme language, I wasn't saying that extreme language automatically makes an answer choice right or wrong. It's all relative to the stimulus. So if the stimulus has a particular degree of certainty, you will often want the correct answer to match that degree of certainty. It may not match it precisely. It could actually be more moderate. Let's say if we're talking about inference questions, some is more moderate than most. And so the word some or information about some would be supported by the word most as given in the stimulus.
Gotcha.
Now, one thing you mentioned for parallels is true, which is that parallels do not always match exactly. LSAC is very sneaky in their question stem wording. They say which one of the following is most similar. Doesn't have to be exact, although it will usually be pretty darn close. And so you just want to look for what's the best. You can also work, of course, by process of elimination as well. Before we sign off, what would you say is the biggest insight you got from our session today?
Definitely your process of reviewing wrong answers, because I know that's like the single most important way to improve when it comes to like tests and exams.
Thanks for tuning into the show. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already to be notified of new episodes as I release them. And feel free to reach out if you need anything at all as you move forward with your prep. I'm happy to help however I can. In the meantime, I'll wish you all the best and take care.